I'm off to meet a stranger, a wonderful stranger named Joe. He's vegan and he gardens and he's someone I don't really know. I'm riding solo today, but we're gonna go check out a really awesome garden. It's about an hour away and it's not quite all the way down in Ithaca where Jay lives. I'm running a little late, so I gotta head down and we're gonna meet Joe. Well, I just pulled in. From what I can see right here, it looks like it's gonna be a fun trip though. There's a greenhouse and a big barn. I think I'm gonna run inside the greenhouse and meet up with Joe right now. So let's go. Well, let me introduce you to Joe. I'm really excited. It's absolutely beautiful here. So Joe, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, let's see here. So I moved to upstate New York about, I think 11 years ago or so. I moved from the Midwest. I have always had an interest in homesteading and growing my own food and trying to live off the land. The place that you're gonna see here while you're here and taking a little fun tour is basically kind of my life's experience now being played out as a real life homestead project. I've actually been a strict vegan for I think just over 20 years now as of sometime here in 2020. It's funny because 20 years ago, coworkers of mine at the time would tell me things like, "You're going to die." And all this stuff. I hearken from a time before easy access to nutritional yeast and no Vegenaise and no Light Life products. But anyway, that's pretty much it. I'm excited to show you about the house, the greenhouse, the kind of homestead philosophy and all that stuff.
How many acres are we looking at on this property?
So this is only just shy of 5 acres. It's 4.9 or 4.84 or something like that.
Okay.
However, when it comes to what I'm actually cultivating for food, it's probably just over a third of an acre. So I'm saying a half acre just as a generic way of expressing it, but when it comes to actual cultivated ground, it could be closer to a quarter. There's actually a lot of food that also just grows in this environment. Mm-hmm. And one thing that I'll be sure to show you is all the blackberries that are growing all around the property that I didn't even plant. And I did an audit about 2 weeks ago, and I estimated there's over 100 pounds of pickable blackberries at that time. You can't even buy them in the store, and it's one of the highest nutrition, highest antioxidant products that comes native inside, Zone 5A here in upstate New York.
What do you say we get out there and start poking around?
Here we are, kind of at the entrance to my homestead garden. And the perimeter here is to try to keep the deer out. The deer also like the same food I like. It's kind of an endless struggle trying to keep them out, but I'm going to do the best I can to give you an incredibly concise general overview, and you're just going to have to pester the channel for any fine details. This right here is kind of the main kind of hangout zone for the garden, and we built a really large bench. It's actually 13 feet long, and it's awesome. Or at least it was awesome during a time when it was really fun having, quite a few people over, which now this bench is very lonely and it only gets me sitting on it. From right here, this vantage, you'll see this kind of large raised bed, kind of C-shaped garden. And this is where I do a lot of just random stuff. So we're growing ginger and kales, and all the sunflowers are volunteers from last year, and tomatoes and beans, and it's just kind of a fun little chaos garden that is a lot of the stuff that I like to eat, so I can just walk right out and snip the herbs and grab whatever. And here's a little cement block little fire pit just for fun. Over here we have another outdoor hangout space. $50 grill from Craigslist a friend picked up. One thing I want to preface is that we're kind of in a historic drought right now for this part of upstate New York. Everything is stressed to the max. My personal calculation is on this homestead, we're between 16 and 20 plus inches short for the year on total precipitation, which is somewhere around half the rainfall this area is supposed to get for the year. So it's incredibly dry. So a lot of the plants are stressed. That's my disclaimer for seeing stressed out plants. Right here, this is kind of like the general working area and a little hangout zone, some shade, and we can drop the shade cloth and hang out there. When I say we, it's mostly just me. And here's these big kind of farm benches that I built 2 years ago. Here's a large outdoor sink that came from a restaurant auction. It was only $100, folks, $100. So always check your restaurant auctions because that sink is priceless for this entire operation. You can clean so much produce in it. Composting system going on over there, and we just have general garden supplies and my little garden tool shed that's falling apart. Random sunflowers everywhere, most of which were not planted. They actually are continuously regrowing, and that's part of kind of the philosophy we can talk about much later. These raised beds here, these are a new addition as of last year, and the primary purpose of these raised beds was to try to do a big bumper crop of sweet potatoes. Now, sweet potatoes are something we can talk about at length because I'm pretty much obsessed with them. However, they're kind of difficult to grow in Zone 5A where we are. The raised bed gave us more control, and I'm very excited to see how many potatoes we get from this. The greens on the sweet potatoes look fantastic, but you know, I've yet to dig any up. What we're looking at right now, I can give you all a very general overview. This is the majority of the kind of subsistence veganic garden. And then you see the passive solar house that I built in 2015. And the large northern climate specific passive solar greenhouse, and which I would like to talk about at length later as well, but we're trying to stay focused on the food. And so what we have right here is 7 100-foot long rows that are the primary food producing cultivated area of this particular plot. These 7 rows, you can see I've got potatoes growing right here. This is actually the second planting of potatoes. Now we're Zone 5A. A lot of people would not normally try to do 2 rounds of potatoes, but one thing about this particular homestead is that despite the fact that I don't live a subsistence lifestyle, because it's not that hard to do, it would be easy to live exclusively on the food that we can grow in literally just this spot right here. This was a terrible year for potatoes. I think we only pulled about 80 to 90 pounds out of this entire row. Already, but we might be able to get another 10 to 50 pounds out before the winter comes and the frost kills these plants off. A lot of making zero input and veganic gardening work is you being willing to kind of maximize your productivity out of a small amount of space. But it can be diminishing returns, so you have to learn your land and kind of learn what you can get away with. And it looks like I'm going to get away with 2 complete potato crops in Zone 5A. So I'm pretty proud about that. We just walked about 50 feet. And so from right here, you'll see I've got the garlic was here. It was just recently harvested. Now I just put in sweet potato slips. I do not expect to get sweet potatoes here because they were planted just a month ago. However, the greens are edible, which most people don't know that. And the greens are delicious, and so I could just consider it a salad green. You'll see a very dry pond just over here to my right. The pond and the kind of aquaculture that is inside of this enclosed perimeter is a critical component to actually maintaining this garden space. This pond actually usually for most of the year has at least a few feet of water in it, and with that few feet of water comes snakes, water snakes, you know, every kind of frog under the sun. I think there's at least 5 different varieties, including the tree frogs and the spring peepers. All of those amphibians are a critical component of the pest management in this entire garden ecosystem. A high degree of biodiversity of plants or weeds inside the garden actually allows me to have no formal pest management system. I consider these water spaces to be the heart of this entire homestead. What you're looking at here has had 0 fertility imported. There's been no manure of any kind, no topsoil, no compost, nothing has been trucked in. This is the hardest imaginable way to try to grow some food and be a subsistence farmer, because almost everyone has access to at least some kind of fertility, cheap or free. And I do as well, but I chose not to do it, mostly because maybe I want to do it the hard way, and also because I wanted to make a point. And I think I've made the point now, and that's why I'm really happy to share it with everybody. Here is a 2-year-old patch of asparagus. I love asparagus, it's one of my favorite things. We've got a row of black beans. This was pinto beans, we just harvested a week ago. Behind that was chickpeas, if you believe it. Chickpeas in Zone 5A. We only got about 2 pounds, but I'm satisfied with the experiment. The row beyond that is a mixture of peppers and squash, then tomatoes, and then the brassica row. You can see the 4-year-old asparagus plot, and so this is where asparagus start getting pretty big, and these put out nice thumb-sized asparagus for 2 whole months in the springtime. All these cattails also are a crazy amount of biomass. So when I said that, everything, all the fertility here comes from this spot, that could include pulling some of these cattails out as a compostable mulch layer on top of the garden beds. Here is a bunch of black caps and red raspberries. And the drought was so bad that it really stressed them out because this never received a lick of water. But next year, I'm sure they're going to be really, really quite vigorous. This is mostly uncultivated land here, and these are actually swales that I created in order to catch runoff water from the ponds. So the water will pool in here, and it will allow it'll allow me to keep a lot more moisture inside the soil. At a later date, I will probably eventually put like squash or melons or something on these swales. But right now, just having all these native wildflowers and just a crazy variety of whatever wants to grow is also a critical component of bringing in pollinators and also beneficial insects. This is Jerusalem artichoke, and it's a giant stand of them. We can talk more about this as a kind of crop focus at a later point, but I consider this to be one of the critical kind of subsistence foods that you can grow in this zone, or even colder zones in here. This area right here will produce, I don't know exactly how many, but it would be in the several tens of thousands of calories of food. The only thing you have to watch out for with some of these plants is that this will eventually take over your garden. So you have to be careful. And so that's why I have this across the pond from my primary garden space. Everything you see here is grown without the importation of any topsoil, any compost, any manure, or any, like petrochemical fertilizers of any kind. It's literally only using what is already here and trying to cultivate the food that I want to eat.
Joe, I want to thank you so much for inviting me out to your place and checking out your vegan homestead. What other tours are we going to do?
We can do the Passive Solar house tour, the Passive Solar greenhouse tour. We can do a little bit of a native food, like endemic food, a little plant walk. We can also cover in detail how the hand-dug ponds and the dug ponds I have in the garden help keep pests down in the garden. We can talk a lot about the different philosophies that I adopted that allowed me to realize that not only is it possible to have a kind of zero input or closed loop veganic subsistence homestead, it's actually not nearly as hard as people think. And it's a surprisingly low amount of knowledge. It's more a matter of letting the plants and your area do what it wants to do anyway, and you just kind of shaping and molding it a tiny bit to get the output that you want. And so I look forward to sharing all of it.
Thanks a lot for watching. We will see you in another video. Make sure you click that old subscribe button because we got a lot of stuff to show you.
Subscribe.
That's the button that he's pressing.
Yeah.